So we're going to put the final touches on our project now, and the main thing you want to remember is that this is just your very first project, your very first tutorial. There's a lot more that can be done inside of the SOLIDWORKS Cell program to get your presentation to look exactly the way that you want it, exactly the way that the customer wants it. But for now, let's take a look at the final project. So here you can see the final resultant web page of this project, and I'll include this web link down below in the description so you can log into this page and poke around. This is a public facing website. One thing I always like to do is send this link to a coworker, and I watch them load the page for the very first time and kind of watch them navigate around and see if it's intuitive. But I'm also looking to see how long are the models taking to load, because you don't want the models to be taking too long to load up, or else it becomes kind of a prohibitive or just not a fun experience for the customer. So moving around the screen here, you can see that I added a tab up top with some different controls. You've got your different views here, your left view, your front view, your top view. You've also got what's called a home view, and you can also get to that home view at any time by doing a double mouse button. We'll talk a little bit more about the home view later in the presentation. One of my favorite icons on here is the ruler, where it shows you the overall dimensions of your project, and those dimensions actually rotate with the view. And then you've also got an icon here for 360 rotate. And what's really cool about this is we can actually change materials while it's rotating and get kind of some real-time feedback as to how different materials may look from different angles. So I think your customers will really like that one. Something that I added in here was just an icon to indicate navigation. I don't really personally like this icon. I don't think I did as good a job as I could have, so I'm going to go and make a better image for that in the future. But I just wanted to throw it in there because it's something that I think is helpful to understand how to zoom, pan, and rotate when your customers are looking at this view. It may be something you want to consider putting together. At the bottom here, you can see we've got our group names, which we've already talked about throughout the presentation. We've also, at the upper right here, now got our camera strip. The camera strip has these pre-cooked configurations of the model. So I've got one with oak on the outside, mahogany on the outside, and MDF as a speaker panel, and then MDF on the outside and maple as a speaker panel. We can click on this little book here in the corner to see any of these in a final rendered view. So you can see that I can cycle through any of these in this final rendered view. And we can also choose some new options and then assign our final rendered view to those new options. So let's say I want to go with the larger version of the speaker, and then I'm going to say that I want the speaker covers to be gray or to be red, and then I'm going to say that I want the speakers themselves to be Arctic. And now I'm going to click the little render button here, and this is going to generate a new rendering in that configuration with the SOLIDWORKS Speaker Company watermark right on the rendering. So if I was to go and share it on social media or anything like that, I'm going to get a little bit of free advertising for my company. So again, at this point, I can click on the little book that shows up here. I can, wow, that looks great. I really like that with the red there. I can cycle through all these different renderings, see which ones I like the most, create more renderings until I get one that I really like. And then at that point, I could click Add to Cart. Now in this tutorial, we're really just getting you started with SOLIDWORKS Cell, but in the future, we'll talk about how to do things like setting up SKUs and setting up prices and using e-commerce as part of your SOLIDWORKS Cell configuration. So now let's take a look at what we're doing under the hood to get to some of these great results. So a lot of what I've done here is clerical. For example, you can see that I added an appropriate name for this part file, for this part file, for this part file, as well as a SKU for each of these part files. And that's going to help me when I add a button that says add to cart or place order, because I'm going to be able to take that information and then feed it downstream, whether that's going to my order management team or to my quoting team, whatever it's going to, I'm going to be able to incorporate that metadata information. Next, when it comes to my groups, I decided to do a kind of less is more type of a scenario when it came to my materials. So I'm using less materials here. And again, each of these materials that I've created, I can also assign a SKU to. So for example, when it comes to the top panel, that top panel can be top oak, top mahogany, top maple, or top MDF, depending on which configuration I select and which material I select for my SKU. You can also see here that I've gone to my speaker panel and just to match the same colors. I just decided to give the speaker panel the same color options. Then when it comes to my rings, I again went with kind of a less is more scenario. So I'm just giving my customers a few possibilities for their color selections. And with the cones, I'm giving them 4 possible color selections. On the tab for scene settings, I went through and made a couple of little adjustments to the lighting. I just didn't like the way the shadow was coming out, so I updated it. I also got myself to a view that I really liked, and then I clicked on this button here that says Save Default View. And when you save that default view, that becomes your home view. So it becomes a view that you jump to when you click on this icon, and it also becomes a view that you jump to when you do a double mouse button in the background. Next on the tab that says Renderer, I went through, I clicked the button that says Optimize Models for Rendering. You always want to do this before you kind of generate the final publication of your project. I increased the width of the rendering. I added the SOLIDWORKS Speaker Company watermark and positioned it. And then I went through and created some of these pre-cooked configurations for my rendering. So just some pre-cooked renderings here, as well as some pre-cooked setups for different colors, different material options, so that my customers kind of get some inspiration when they first get to my web page. So then the last thing is the preview, the layout for our page. And one of the things you want to always get in the habit of doing is clicking View Page. Then you can change the size of this page and see how the SOLIDWORKS cell environment responds. See if menus end up overlapping or if things start to look bad, because someone might be viewing this on a tablet or on a different size screen than you, and you want to make sure you're accounting for all elements. In fact, in the advanced layout tutorial, which I'll include down in the description below, we actually talk about how you can use this option here where it says Configuration and generate some different layouts depending what size screen the customer may be viewing your project on. So what we did with the preview here is we set up the controls here. So you can see I clicked on controls. Let me just delete this and I'll add it again. I clicked on controls and then I just did a drag and drop here to drop in my controls strip. I created what's called a custom element down here. And after I created that custom element, I came over to the right here and I said background image and assigned an image to it. Down at the bottom here, we got the group names, which we've already talked about. I moved the render strip up here. I added another custom element here with another image on it that says customize your speaker, add to cart. What that's going to do for me is it's going to ensure that as the web page changes size, that customize your speaker button moves right along with the web page. I added the parts list, which we talked about a little bit earlier. You notice that I'm kind of trying to stay consistent with the width of these. Again, that's going to make it a little more aesthetically pleasing. As you resize the page, you're going to see that these images kind of stay centered amongst one another. And then finally, down at the bottom here, our materials. So that's going to do it for our final touches, but stick around because we've got one final video to kind of wrap everything up.